We live in a very peculiar time. We live in a time where for 1900 years God has not done one thing to prove that He exists. Right? Not one thing to prove that He exists. But remember that every man is born with the knowledge which very quickly asserts itself that above his own being there is a being who is supreme. You can call Him the first cause, the Almighty, or you can call Him just happen. You know, some people worship a God named just happen. They say everything just happened. Or you can call Him that, but everybody knows that above His being there is a being that is supreme. That this one should be revered. That this one should be honored. That this one should be respected. That this one demands an amount of devotion from you. That this one gives you of His love. This one wants your love. That is our God. If a man would grow to a certain age, he would know from a common knowledge, con science. Remember word building last night? Well, con is together. Common. Science is knowledge. Condominium is where the people have dominion together. Dominion is rule, control. That's why we say condominium. When they had to find the word for it, they took the word that means common or together, took the word that means rulership or ownership or control, made it condominium. It's a good word. It speaks the truth. And so when we say conscience, we're speaking of that knowledge that man has that tells him the difference between things that are right and things that are wrong. I'm not saying the fine details now, but he'll know the difference between right and wrong, and he'll know that he should do the right, and he knows that he should refrain from the wrong. And it's written in the Word of God that whosoever fears God, that is, reveres and respects and honors Him and works righteousness, he'll be accepted of God. He won't be rejected. God will accept this one if he fears God and works righteousness. But it doesn't leave it up to you to say what that righteousness will be. You know, there are people who go to God and say, Lord, if you'll make me a success in show business, I'll take a portion of that money and I'll use it to build a children's hospital. So they have great success in that sleaziest business in the world called show business, and then they give money to build children's hospital, and they think this is a great work of God. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? I'll need to name him. Now, I don't go for things like that. Don't buy things like that. You can bargain like that with God. I just simply tell you that God requires that every man should refrain what he knows to be wrong and do what he knows to be right. Anybody ever tell you, I drink too much? Ever hear that? Sure, you've heard. And they know that they shouldn't. You know, they shouldn't. Maybe they kind of know that there's no place for the drunkard when God governs this earth. Even today, we try to put them in jail, in homes to get them cured, like they did Billy Carter, send him off to the Navy Hospital to get him dried out. But there's no place under God's government for the drunkard, commonly called by a more respectable name of the alcoholic, and so on. There's no place under God's government for the thief. We smack him on the back of the hand if we catch him. We very seldom catch him. God's government, there's no place for a thief. That's all there is to it. So on. But let me tell you, if a man does what he knows to be right, refrains what he knows to be wrong, that man is acceptable to God. But you can't say what it is you're going to do. The question will be is, what do you know to be right? You think you can get by and reject Jesus Christ? No, you can't. You know you should have relationships with Him. Mike, isn't that right? You know that your relationship to God should be through Him. You know that. Maybe somebody else doesn't. That's different, but you know it. So, when it comes to Mike fearing God and doing what he knows to be right, it requires him to believe in, it requires him to receive the Lord Jesus Christ. Or maybe his neighbor down the street, that God couldn't require of him, maybe he's never heard. But we're living in this, the dispensation of the grace of God. And it is different. It is different. Oh, if we'd been living back in Old Testament times and I had been Elijah, we'd have said, we'll show those prophets a Baal. We'll show them who's God. We'll build an altar of sacrifice here. And we will put the offering on it. You cry to Baal, and I'll cry to Jehovah. And the God that answers by fire, he will demonstrate that he is God. Wonderful story. How to really open it up there and read it. So they erected the altar, put the sacrifice upon it, the prophets of Baal. They ran around it, they screamed, they cried, they cut themselves with knives till the blood flowed. Poor old, good old Elijah, he just stood there and taunted him. He said, cry louder. Maybe he's taking a nap. And he said, maybe he's gone hunting. Out on the chase. Too far away to be heard. So he just tongue. And finally they had to give up. And Elijah said, douse this whole thing with barrels of water. But the water ran off of all of it. Elijah spoke to Jehovah, and the fire licked up the sacrifice, it licked up the wood, it even licked up the stones, it licked up the water. Now a man wrote a book, a Christian man, and said, where is the Lord God of Elijah? The God that answers by fire and reveals himself. And he says, we just don't have the faith. No, I say it's because we're living in this, the dispensation, the grace of God, and God is not proving to anyone that he's God. This is not the time when our God is proving himself. So we'll draw the lines here, and we'll put here grace. Now, this is where we live. And you know and I know that this is different from the period of 33 years of which the book of Acts is the history. 33 years. And I tell you, whether you know it or not, that the time may come before I'm through with this message, the time could even come before I speak the next sentence, that God would speak in heaven and assume sovereignty. And we would be living under God's government in the kingdom of God. That will be different. I'm talking now about this time in which we live. Now, Tad. This time in which we live. Last night I showed you that in Ephesians 4, we were told to walk worthily of the position in which we have been placed. I know that's kind of fancy language when it says the vocation wherewith ye are called. But I like to make things simple, just as simple. You know the work that I've done on the Greek word kaleo. You know that I've demonstrated that this word means to place or to position. You might put a man in a position of responsibility. I might just position this book out here, but that's kaleo in the Greek. Also means to invite. Now, he says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, the bound one of the Lord, I beg of you that you walk worthily. I'm changing it there to make the English good. Of the vocation, that's the position wherewith you've been placed. Here I am, can't claim to be a single thing, but a sinner who was saved by Jesus Christ in this, the dispensation of the grace of God. I wasn't saved in the Acts period when God confirmed the Word with signs following. When my father gave me the first real bit of God's Word that took hold of me like a fish hook gets into a man's flesh and the barb won't let him take it out. When I heard that first bit, there was no sign to confirm it. I even spoke against it. The word was that men are not saved by doing, they're saved by believing. The Bible says, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. I knew a lot about the Bible and the stories and so on before that. But this took hold of me as positive truth that I hadn't believed and didn't know about. And of course, at 18 years of age, anything I didn't know could not be true, because I knew everything. And so I rejected this. And Father let me know he wasn't talking to me at that time, and passed by. Well, now I am a sinner saved by grace, and this is the dispensation of the grace of God, and I know I've got to walk with all lowliness. I've got to do this. If I start telling you, I'm the great I am, so I get myself a fancy robe and a high hat shaped like a fish's head, and a gold chain around my neck with a gold cross on it, press all the people, you know, some big thing. I got to stop and tell you a story there. There was this black preacher who liked to finish his message with a flourish. Want everything finished with a flourish, so he's going to preach on the Holy Ghost coming down like a good oven. So he put a boy up in the rafters, a little colored boy. Said, now when I say, come, Holy Spirit, you let the dove loose. Got that place, and he shouted out, come, Holy Spirit. Nothing happened. Second time, shouting, come, Holy Spirit. Nothing happened. Afraid the boy had gone to sleep, he yelled it all the louder, come, Holy Spirit. Finally, he said, what's the matter up there? Like the boy said, a yellow cat done ate the dove. What do I do now? Throw down the yellow cat? Well, I don't have to make a big display. I kid a lot, but my walk is a lowly walk. I make no claim to being anything at all but a sinner saved by grace of God. But I will tell you the truth. I'm a man who has studied the Word for 60 years. And many people have known me long enough to know that that is the truth. So you walk lowly. You walk meekly. That means not aggressive. It also says with long suffering, which would be a patience. Really there, when it said aggressive, it means not self-assertive. And you forbear one another in love. Made up your mind in advance that you're going to bear with them. Forbearing, that's what it is. I'm going to bear with these people no matter what they say to me or what they say about me. I'm just going to bear with them. That's forbearing one another in love. And you are to endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That's a part of the walk of our calling. But that's not what I want to deal with. I want to deal with the truths, step by step, that brought us into this position that we are in today. When I was in Sunday school, I learned a little song about how good it would have been to have been here upon earth when Jesus was here among men. That's not quite it. But if I had been here on earth when Jesus was here among men, he would not even have spoken to me. He didn't to the Syrophoenician woman. When he gave his reason why, he said it's not meet to take the children's bread out of the Israelites and give it to dogs. They were the Gentiles, and I would have been a Gentile. You see. So it wouldn't have been so good, maybe, to have been here on earth. In this dispensation, the grace of God, as long as I can find a little bit of the Gospel of John, maybe it could bring me salvation. There is a story told which has been authenticated that in the days of Martin Luther, the days of the German Reformation, that there was a man walking on the street and he saw a little piece of paper, had some handwriting on it, and he picked it up, curiosity to see what it might be, and it said on there, God so loved the world that he gave. God so loved the world that he gave. What did he give? I didn't get any of it. He wanted to find out what this was. God so loved the world that he gave. Took it to person after person. Nobody could tell him what this meant. And finally, he took it to a minister. The minister said, well, that's something out of the Gospel of John. That's out of John's writings. And he went to a place where they had a copy of the Bible, and he started to search through it. He soon found that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And whosoever believeth on him should not perish but have everlasting life. So if you just start out with God so loved the world that he gave, find out what he gave. And what you have to do to participate on this, and you'll find out it doesn't say that he that joins the church and is baptized and takes a little bread and wine, gives when the offering is taken, sings in the choir and so on, doesn't say anything about that. It says, whosoever believeth on him will not perish, but have everlasting life. Wonderful. That settles it. I take God's word there, and I think accordingly. So maybe you might find a scrap of John. But in the Acts period, you had to have a divinely commissioned man speaking a divinely inspired message. God would have had to confirm that message with signs following, and when you believed, he would accredit your faith with certain signs that always followed those who believed. That was the Acts period. We're in the dispensation of grace. We want to walk worthy of the calling wherewith we're called. So, we know that the Lord was not sent but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And in the gospel period, that's before the Acts period, in the 3 years of his ministry, it was not right to take the children's bread and give it to the dog. You may say, I don't think so. I tell you, God says so. Jesus Christ said so. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. Wasn't Peter that said that. Wasn't Stephen that said it. It was the Lord Jesus Christ. And that was the term that he used. And during the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ, only 2 Gentiles ever got anything out of him. The Syrophoenician woman got her daughter healed. The centurion got his servant healed. Those are the only 2. The Roman centurion. Only 2 people that ever got anything out of Jesus Christ during his earthly ministry. I know the churches don't want it that way. I know they don't want it like that. But that's what the Word says. I take God at his word. I think accordingly. That's faith to me. That's my definition of faith. That's the way I think. That's the way I always will think. All right, we know that. And then we know that when the gospel was preached, it was to the Jews only. I can show you in the book of Acts that when these people went forth, they preached the word, but to the Jews only. That went on that way for 8 years. And then God, by a thrice repeated sign, authorized or commissioned Peter to go to the house of Cornelius, a Gentile, but that is the only Gentile that Peter was authorized to go to, and he never tried to pad his part. You know what it is to pad your part? When an actor gets a little part on the stage and he'll try to build it up by slipping in extra words, Peter never tried to pad his part. Did I ever tell you the story about the boy that had a part in a school play, and it was just his job to say, twinkle, twinkle, little star. That's all he was supposed to say, that little verse. He wasn't satisfied to that. So when he said it, it came out like this. Scintillate, globule vivific. Fain would I fathom thy nature specific. Loftily opposed in the ether capacious, strongly resembling a gem carbonaceous. Peter didn't pad his part. He did what the Lord told him to do, and that was the end of Peter's ministry to the Gentiles. If you'd lived in the Acts period, if you'd come across the Apostle Paul, and if you had been God-fearing and working righteousness, you would have got the message after it was preached to the Jew first. Now, when it tells me in Romans 1 that the gospel was the salvation-bringing message was to the Jew first and also to the Greek, I take God at his word and I think accordingly. I don't care what you do. And I know these people that have the Jewish missions, they like to push this because they can use that to raise money, you see. I won't use anything in the Word of God to raise money. Not a thing. You ever heard me use anything just to raise money? Not in the least. I won't do it. But I know men that will do it. And you heard them do it. Boy, they can quote Old Testament, New Testament, and all of this thing and that, and they'll talk about the widow's mite to try to get the widows to give so they can stay at the best hotels and eat in the best restaurants and everything else. You'll never hear me do that. I do stay at good hotels. I'm in this hotel. I do eat good meals. That was a good meal tonight, Louis. I ate with Louis and Cookie tonight. Very good meal. But I'm not going to try just to use God's Word to raise money. In fact, I'm no money raiser. Maybe the work would go faster if I were a money raiser, but I just can't be. Just out of my line. All right, now, We can get back to our lesson. I can show you that there was a time when it was the Jew first. And for many years, until Paul really began to speak in the city in Antioch, it was to the Jew only, outside of the household of Cornelius. Cornelius did not become an evangelist. He didn't resign his commission and go back to Rome and become an evangelist and build the Roman church as they try to tell us. That's just a lot of made-up stuff. See, no Gentile was commissioned in the Acts period to preach the word. I couldn't have been a herald there. I couldn't have told you about Christ. That's the way it is. That's because it's in the book. That isn't church theology. That's positive biblical theology. The most positive and the most biblical theology. But then the time came when the Apostle Paul made a pronouncement that made the great change, and this was the first great step, and that is in Acts 28. The first great pronouncement that did not put the Jew down. Now, this did not put the Jew down in the least. All it did was take the rest of the nations. It took the rest of the nations and brought them up to the place of equality with the Jew. Here was a Jew up here. The salvation-bringing message of God was authorized to him. This statement authorizes it to the nations. That just lifts them up to the level of the Jew as far as the gospel is concerned in this, the dispensation of the grace of God. And we'll read that once again in Acts 28:28 to bring those who were not here last night up to date as far as the truth is concerned. So in Acts 28:28, it reads like this: Be it known, therefore, unto you. The Greek is forceful. It says, be aware of this. I'll repeat the illustration of last night. You're aware that there's a traffic light up at the corner. Pardon, you know there's a traffic light up at the corner. Be aware of it when you drive up there. To know it is one thing. But if you're not aware of it when you get there, you might go through and get involved in an accident. We don't want to lose any customers. Be it known, therefore, unto you that the salvation, an adjective, that requires a noun, and the noun must be found in the context. If I would tell you that I'm not adjective in this work, that's a proper statement, meaning I am not alone in this work. Gabe is with me in it, Louis is with me in it, Saul is with me in it, these brethren. I am not adjective in this work. Adjective means you're not alone. Therefore, an adjective can never stand alone. If I'm sitting here and say, eating a meal, and say, this is good. Good's an adjective. Adjective can't stand alone, but there's a context that supplies the adjective. I don't mean it's a good recorder, a good pair of glasses. I'm talking about thing-o-mediums, good cake, good meat, or whatever it might be. You and I are looking at the sunset. I say, this is beautiful. Beautiful. What am I talking about? What am I talking about? I'm talking about the sun. That's the context. We can write it out. You can always supply. Wherever there's an adjective, if the noun does not appear, then it must be supplied from the context. Now, the context of this has to do with something down here. It is the salvation-bringing message. Be aware of this, that the salvation-bringing message of God has been sent, the Greek word apostello. Get Seed and Bread number 6 and study it all out for yourself, and you'll find out that when this is used of an inanimate thing, it means to make freely available. Be it known, therefore, unto you that the salvation-bringing message of God is made freely available to the nations, and it will get through to them. And God saw to it the salvation-bringing message is now in the world. It is in the world. It's available. You don't have to go out of the world to get it. You don't have to climb up to heaven. See, even in the Acts period, you didn't have to climb to heaven. It was on the lips of men, in their very mouth in the Acts period. But now it's not even on the lips of men. It's in this book. If men speak it, they have to go to the book first. So God guaranteed it would get to them, and he caused John to write. And John wrote a book. When he came to the end of that book, he said there were many things that Jesus did that are not written in this book, but these are written. And as Kenneth Weiss translated, these are written and they stand written, in his expanded version, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the one who will bring every promise of the Old Testament into realization. Every prophecy of the Old Testament into fulfillment. Will someday the seed of Abraham be a channel of blessing to the entire world? Who will bring that into realization? The one who is the Christ. Whoever it is, the one who is the Christ will do it. Who will cause the desert to blossom like the rose bush blossoms? The one who is the Christ. Who will cause men to beat their swords into plowshares? United Nations? No. The one who is the Christ. Now, we believe that Jesus is the Christ. And of course I should go on there and tell you that there's even personal salvation in this. That's one of the promises of the Old Testament about your sins being like scarlet, they shall be like wool. Though they be red, red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Who'll bring that into realization? The one who is designated, named, anointed. Anointed, the Greek word is Christos. The Hebrew word, Mashiach. Is that near enough? Mashiach. What do you say? Now, how do you say it?
Mashiach.
Mashiach. He wants me to get that guttural sound in there. How is it, Saul? What do you say? Mashiach. Same way. I like to get it right.
Christos. Christos.
Yeah, Christos. Christos. Christos.
No, not Christos. Christos.
There's the acupuncturist again. Now, give me the needle. All right. One good thing about it, I have a friend that he knows a little Greek. He claims he's a Greek scholar. He spends all his time trying to catch people up on their pronunciations. I say to him, listen, I don't care how it's pronounced. I want to know what it means. You can say either, you can say either, you can say neither, you can say neither. The question is, what does it mean? You see? So if you want to say Perusia, go ahead. If you want to say parousia, let's know what this means. That's the thing. I spent years trying to find out what that word meant. It's translated coming. It doesn't mean coming. Couldn't mean coming. I don't care how you pronounce it. I don't care whether you say ecclesia or ecclesia. If you don't say either one, just so you don't say church. All right, now. But we can have a lot of fun sometimes with these pronunciations. All right. It's been freely authorized to the nations. It'll get through to them. So he that believeth that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. You see, the Son has to be the one that could take God's place. Do anything that God could do. Assume every responsibility that God could assume. Otherwise, he could not be the Son of God. This is based upon the family system, not our use of the word son. See? Not our use of the word son. And when God makes me a son of God, not the son, now a son of God, he will grace me or equip me for everything I need to be that son of God. All right? And believing on him, believing that Jesus Christ might have life through his name. Wonderful thing. Drawing a breath, you draw in life. There's life in the world. Every time you draw in a breath, you draw in life. See? And you live. If you quit drawing it in, oh boy. You don't want a doctor then, you want an undertaker. Mortician. So, this life, I don't know how long it's going to stay with me. It's been a good life. I've lived 78 years. I don't lie about my age because I got to thank God for every day of it. I don't say it for sure. I have no word from God. It's not a matter of faith with me. It's a matter of feeling. Shouldn't go by faith. Should go by faith. But I do believe sometimes that God's keeping me alive because there's so much work yet that I have to do. I don't want to die. I don't believe it's game to die. I want to live. But I want to finish those at least 100 more and get the second volume out, and 300 more if I can, because I've got that much material up here in notes and in rough manuscripts that I want to get into writing. Because those 100 have been such a blessing to so many people that when I read these letters at times, I weep. I do. To think that God would take this one and would use him to bless people in Singapore, in Ghana, Africa, West Africa, in South America, and in every state of the Union. every state of the union. There are those who write in to express their blessings received through the leaflets of seed and bread, and especially those who say, my faith was gone. It was gone. Lost all interest in Bible study till I got seed and bread. So I must go on. All right. Now, the next thing that comes is that Paul writes to Timothy. And in Timothy, he makes a statement that's going to make the biggest difference in the world. I touched on this last night. We're not going to argue about the dating of these epistles or the order of these epistles. This epistle was written and it stands written. Now, if you had lived in the Acts period, I'd say every believer, not every believer, but practically every believer in the Acts period could mediate between God and man, if mediation was the order. You couldn't unless it was the order. Just couldn't go around playing mediator, same old thing over and over. But if mediation was required, you could be a mediator. And Peter and John were going up to the temple to pray at the third hour. Good Jews going up to the temple. Book of Acts, chapter 3. There's a lame man there, lame from the time he was born, never walked. They carried him out there every day to beg, and he supported the family by begging. And he stuck out his hand. They were passing, and he keeps sticking it out to each one, but always looking to the next one, you see. Catch a soft one, and hadn't seen him there so many times. And so he reached out to Peter and John. It's kind of plain as you read the record. He just started for the next one. They commanded, said, look on us. They got his attention. And then they said, silver and gold, Peter said, have I none. God didn't give me a pocket full of money to mediate it, put it out to you, stand between you with this money. See, here would be the Lord giving Peter a pocket full of money, and he'd give out quarters and dimes and dollars. No, sir. Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I unto thee. Where do you get it? From God. To mediate. Such as I have give I unto thee, in the name of Jesus of Nazareth, arise and walk. And a man who had never walked, never learned to walk, didn't know how to walk, didn't have the legs to walk, immediately got up and walked and ran and went in the temple. That's something. Now, that's mediation. But then you might have found some little mediators. That's a big mediator. You might have found quite a few little mediators. Maybe there was some fellow that just had a gift of government, a divine gift, not just ability. I think I have some natural ability to kind of run a meeting. We had a little trouble in Rockford, and people came up to compliment me on how I handled it. I said, that was nothing. But I do trust that I have ability to take care of a meeting and keep it in order and so on. But that isn't the gift of government. But there were men among the believers that had an actual gift, that they could keep things running smooth and in order and never get off the track because of governments. You ever know this too, that the hardest thing in the world that you ever tried to do is to help people that need help? I don't care what anyone says, that's the hardest thing that you'll ever do, is to try to help people that need help. That's why we do not give money to the Skid Row bunch on the street. It'll just be spent for liquor, and to try to help them, I guess we would just harm them, and there's just no use to waste your money that way. I feel sorry for them, my heart goes out to them, but the hardest thing in the world to help people. Any social worker will just tell you it's almost impossible to help people. But there were men who had the ability to help, a God-given ability to help, and when they helped, people were helped. They were mediators between God and man through their gifts. You found all of these mediators, Paul, all the rest of them. But when you come over here to 1 Timothy, which was written in this dispensation, you've got this word right here in 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 5. For there is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. And that makes all the difference in the world today. There is no one any nearer to God than what I am. There is no one that's got a shorter route to God than what I have. There is no one whose voice can get to God more quickly than mine can. There is no one nearer to God than what you are. There is no one whose voice can get to God more quickly than yours can. Oh, it could be maybe that you've erected a great big brick wall of sin and unbelief between you and God, and something ought to be done about that. But if you're a sinner saved by the grace of God, you need no one to stand between you and God. You need no one. Why, people think if he died and there wasn't a minister in the room when the person died, he'd be sure to be lost. So they send out to get the minister in. He can mediate between God and men, they think. Of course, he's got to be properly ordained. And if he's not, why, it just won't do any good. No, you don't need a minister if you're facing death. Maybe I mentioned the sweet little nurse in the hospital when they took me in there one Sunday, and I had a gallbladder that never had given me really any trouble. I didn't know I'd have this illness, but no pains. Good night, it was gangrenous already. And they were trying to organize a surgical team on Sunday afternoon. Anyone ever connected with a hospital know how hard it is to find surgeons and anesthetists and all of this for a major operation. And this little girl was so worried. She said, "Mr. Sellers, don't you have any family?" I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "My wife was here. She just left. But she'll be back. She didn't even have a chance to comb her hair this morning. They took me out so quick, and she came just as she was. And she went back home to comb her hair and change her clothes. And I said, she'll be back. Don't you have a minister?" And I said, "No, I don't have a minister. I was really too sick to talk. I felt too bad. I suppose I was under partial sedation." So she kept coming back. And she said, "Isn't there someone I could call, Mr. Sellers? Are you a Protestant or a Catholic?" I said, "I'm neither. I'm neither one." Now I said, "Listen, my dear girl, please don't worry about me." I said, "The only one I really want here is my wife. She'll be on her way down here in just a few minutes, I'm sure." And I said, I've got God as my Father. I have Jesus Christ as my Savior. I'm a sinner whose sins are forgiven. And if anything at all happens to me, you'll know it's all right with me just because Jesus Christ is my Savior." But she wanted to get a mediator. So that ended that. But a few days later, and you know how it is after an operation, about that third day, you kind of feel like that you went up against the Rams football team and played without any helmet or uniform. Well, it was the third day, and the man next door was a terminal cancer case. And I could hear him. He cursed the nurses. He was vile. He was mean. He was ornery. He was just a bad guy. But I guess he had money. So he was there in the hospital, and she came in. He finally found out I was a minister. He said, "I want to see that." And this little girl thought, "Oh boy, here's this man's dying, and he's such an awful sinner. He curses, he swears, he blasphemes. Maybe this minister can say something to him." So she came in and said, "The man next door would like to talk to you. Would you talk to him?" Oh, I said, "I feel so bad. I don't think I can even carry on the conversation that got me sedated here to ease this. I don't think I could." So this was about noon. I said, "Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day." But she wanted to get him in there. This man was a terminal case, and he was at the point of death, but he could still get around the wheelchair. So here about 8 o'clock that night, she came pushing him in. This little nurse pushing this great big fellow, this wheelchair. And boy, he looked just about like I'd heard him speak. So he said to me, "Hi, Reverend." I said, "How do you do? How are you?" "Say, Reverend," he said, "tell you what we ought to do." He said, "Let's put a cocktail bar up here on the top floor." He said, "and make some money. You and I, we've been in business together." He thought he was going to shock me, you know. So he said this with quite a few oaths, too. And he thought he was going to shock me. The poor little nurse just wheeled him around and got him out of the room. Well, he didn't need me. He needed the Lord Jesus Christ, and I'm afraid it was just a little bit too late. Okay, we go on. Only one mediator between God and man. Can you live it? Can you take God at His word and think accordingly? Are you going to try to make a pastor or priest or deacon or elder or cardinal or pope? Somebody's got to mediate. No, one mediator between God and man, that just takes them all out. Now, if a man wants to shepherd a church, I'm not objecting to that. He's got the shepherd heart. If he wants to call on the sick, good, I'll call on the sick. I'll do that. I'm not objecting to that. But when people get to a place that they think that because ordaining hands has been laid upon his head, and he sticks an R-E-V before his name and a D-D afterwards, you know, like a rolling pin, two handles, why, and then they try to tell me then that he's closer to God than what I am, and he's the man that you've got to call in when someone's sick. No, you better get a good doctor if someone's sick. When you put him in this place, you're just directing these men as media, and they're just one mediator between God and man. They're sinners saved by grace. That's what the Pope is. If he's saved, I don't know. I hope he is. Seems to be a pretty decent sort of a man. But all he can be is a sinner saved by grace. They can make him something else. He's not that. There's the truth we've got to live. This is a position where we've been placed. There's only one mediator. People say to me, as the woman in Buffalo, New York said, somewhere on God's green earth there's a man that understands my case, and he can heal me. She said that to me. Her husband had money, and he was taking her to all the big meetings and all the big healers, and they traveled. This woman in the wheelchair couldn't get out of it, and he would bathe her and dress her, look after her, and so on. Usually with the help sometimes of a nurse that would come in for a few hours, but sometimes it did it all on his own. And they took her to Florida. There was a big healer down there healing everyone. Finally brought her out to California. And being able to dig in his pocket and give money, he always got in the healing line. You can buy places in those healing lines, you know. And so, because she couldn't get up to the platform, he'd given enough so that the evangelist would come down to her. And people would see her as they would get her so that she would stand up. And she'd either fall on her face or fall back in the wheelchair. And this went on for years as she looked for a mediator. Here was a good friend of mine that knew the truth, whose her son's eyes were going blind, the retina, the mirror, you know. It was breaking up. He was going blind. Everybody was saying, well, you should take him with so-and-so, the healer. Take him here and there, and she wanted to do it. You're desperate. She said, Mr. Sellers, it won't hurt. It can't hurt his eyes. And I said, but listen, Joe. I knew her well enough to call her by her first name. I said, listen, Joe. You're saying that somewhere there's a mediator that maybe he can help. You're denying the Word of God. You're denying every truth that was ever taught. You see. So she went to another man about it. Oh, he said, this just deals with salvation. It just means that there's one saved. That's what this means. Listen, a mediator is not necessarily a savior. Mediator is one in the middle. He's one in between. Truth for today that I'm going to live by and I'm going to die by. See, if anything would happen to me, my funeral would be preached either by a man who's in the printing business or a man who's a mechanical engineer or something like that. That'd be enough. I just say a few words and that'll be it. So that's all I need. I have the same. So can you live it? Can you take God at His word and say, yes, God, that's true. Wasn't true here. No. Wasn't true back here. Won't be true over here. Because over there, I believe that even you and I will mediate between God and man in relationship to their need to know the gracious carry. All right, we're going to move now from Timothy. I'd like to deal with more things here, but now we're going back to Philippians. Back to Philippians. Now, in Philippians, you know that Paul was the apostle that brought these Philippians to know Jesus Christ. Philippians, Paul was their apostle. Paul did not know the Colossians. He knew them by hearsay. He was not their apostle. Paul did not know the people to whom Ephesians, so-called, was written. He was not their apostle. Paul was the apostle to the Philippians. In this epistle, he says some things that will tell us how to walk worthy of the position in which we've been placed. He starts out like this, Paul and Timotheus, the slaves of Jesus Christ. He wants them to know that what he's doing now, he's doing as a slave. A slave. He addresses the saints. That's the holy ones. That doesn't mean sinless ones. That just means those marked out for a special usage. See? Marked out for some special use. God may use them at any time. So he addresses these saints in Christ Jesus, which are at Philippi. We know right where they live, Philippi. With the overwatchers, not the bishops. They wanted to get the bishops in here because this was translated by a bishop-ruled church. Church of England. And all this is the word episkopos. And in some places, the word episkopos has to do with visitation. And strictly speaking, if a man were the visitation minister of a church, he would be going around looking after the welfare of these people, their spiritual welfare. They don't giving me something that's a little more important. But I do know this. Gabe and I know Gabe's done it more here, we've been exercised over the souls of men. We haven't been as successful as we would like to be, as we've tried to help them, straighten them out, keep them on the right track. It's hard to do, but we'll do it. So we'll watch men. We see them going off into some false doctrine, we'll try our best to tell them the truth. And if we see them going into some false practice, some false action that would be described as sin, we will rebuke them in love and tell them they're doing wrong. We'll do it. You will too, Lou. We'll all do this. We've got to do it. We've got to watch over our brethren. Now, we can't get stuck up about this. So, not finally, but a little later he gets to where he praises them in the 5th verse for their fellowship in the gospel from the very first day he came to Philippi right up to now, because he was their apostle. He was the man that had brought them to Christ. He was the man who preached the word to them, whose words was confirmed with signs following, and so on. Then he says something here. He says, being assured of this very thing, that he, as God, the Lord Jesus Christ, who began a good work among you, will be bringing it to a full end until the day of Jesus Christ. So all of this marvelous thing that you see in the Acts period, one sermon saves 1,000 souls. Another sermon saves 3,000 souls. Everyone healed. This one healed, that one healed. Demons cast out and all the rest of it. Things are moving along. Tens of thousands. Notice they're both plural. Tens of thousands of Jews are believing right in Jerusalem alone. And the thing is moving. The overwhelming majority of Jews are believing. I would like to say to the Jewish people, once and for all, that in the years after the death of Jesus Christ, the overwhelming majority of Jews upon the earth, those in Palestine and those in the dispersion, became believers in the fact that Jesus, the man Jesus, one of their countrymen, who was put to death by their rulers, their aristocratic, wealthy rulers who were about to lose their place, and caused him to put to death at their behest by the Romans. But the common people heard him gladly. And the result was that thousands upon thousands upon thousands everywhere became believers. Lenski, the Lutheran writer, says at least half of the 100,000 Jews in Rome became believers in the fact that Jesus was the Christ. And they continued as Jews, too. They didn't try to organize Christian churches. They just simply went on as best they could as Jews, and later had to be Jews in this dispensation of grace. All right. Now he says, that good work that God began among you, He's brought it to a full end until the day of Jesus Christ. And in the so-called evangelical world, and you know what I mean by that, and in the so-called fundamental world, one thing they leave out altogether is the day of Christ, because they didn't get it in their books, and they didn't get it in their charts, and they haven't got it in their theology, and they won't do a thing to spoil it. They've got too big an investment. Too big an investment. And they don't want to spoil those books. There's the day of man, we're in it now. I believe it started when Noah stepped out of the ark. It's the day of man's exaltation, and I believe the day of man continues until the day of grace comes to an end. And when God has finished writing the history, the record of His long dealings with grace into the history of mankind, He will assume sovereignty, and it will be the day of Christ. When you speak of anyone's day, you're dealing with exaltation. Exaltation. And this is the day when man is exalted. Man can do as he pleases in this day. God won't hinder him. Man will never be able to say, well, I could have wiped disease in the earth, but you ordained otherwise. No, sir. If man can do it, God will let him do it. He'll let him do it, but man can't do it. See? Man might say, well, I could have gone to the moon. You went to the moon. Herbert Armstrong said, you'll never get to the moon. God will stop you before you get there. But they got there. They got there. And man can do anything that he can do. God won't hinder. I do not say that God will help. All I tell you is this, God isn't hindering man. He's not hindering man. This is not the day of Christ. The next is the day of Christ, the day when He will be exalted. The day of Christ is the same as the kingdom of God. That is followed by the day of the Lord. Will you say, isn't Lord Christ the same? Yes. Well, then how can one say this is the day of Christ, this is the day of the Lord? Well, wasn't Senator, wasn't Senator John F. Kennedy the same as President John F. Kennedy? Right? Sure. Well, John F. Kennedy had his day as a senator. It all came to an end when he had his day as the president. That's the difference between President Kennedy and Senator Kennedy. You might say Congressman Johnson, Senator Johnson, Vice President Johnson, President Johnson. He had his day as all of them. Christ will have his day, and the word Christ is peculiarly connected with blessing. The fulfillment of every promise and prophecy made in the Old Testament. Then that goes into the day of the Lord. All right. So this good work that God began among them, He's brought it to a full end until the day of Jesus Christ. And if I'm going to walk worthy of the position in which I've been placed, I'm not going to try to go back and restore the book of Acts. I'm not going to go back and try to find those gifts. I'm not going to go back especially and try to imitate those gifts. Neither am I going to say back to Pentecost. You can't go back. That good work that God is doing, He's brought it to a full end until the day of Jesus Christ. Now that's not the translation. Translation is based upon this Greek word, E-P-I-T-E-L-E-O. That's a teleo. Teleo means to finish. Teleo means to end. Epi is what we call an accelerative prefix. You know, words sometimes become accelerative prefix. We can say real good, real bad, real angry, real hard, real soft. We can use those. And all we're trying to do is to accelerate whatever word we're using. How can a thing be real hard and also real soft? Not the same thing, but using the same word, you see. And real cold today, real hot today. Boy, this is a real wet day, real dry day. So we use real. Well, really, epi means on, and it did become an accelerative contribution to be used with a lot of words. And all of the scholars say that this means to bring to a full end. I'm no scholar. But some people worship scholarship, so I shall bring your God before you as a witness. Now, all of the scholars say that epaitaleo means to bring to a full end. And this says here that he that began a good work among you will be bringing it to a full end until the day of Jesus Christ. All right. Now, when he comes a little farther here in verse 10, he says that you may approve things that are excellent. That is what it says. They don't know what to do with this. What this says here is that you may test, put to the test, the things that carry through. And the word here for carry through is the word D-I-A, dia. There's a root you ought to remember. If you're going to measure a circle diameter, you want the diameter of a circle, don't go around it, but go through it. Dia. Dia, meter, measured through. Dia, through, meter, measured. Words are easy. Greek same way. Well, this is diaphero. P-H-E-R-O. Now, this word might give you a little trouble, but I'm sure our word ferry comes from that. But I know this, that there is a passage in Scripture, I'll give you the reference, you taking notes. It's in Mark 11:16, where it says that after the Lord Jesus cleansed the temple, he wouldn't allow any man so much as to take a vessel and carry it through the temple. That's what it means, carry it through. Plain there, not so plain here. Now, we've got to put to the test the things that carry through. Now, what things carry through? Apostles carry through. There is no man on earth today that can say, I am God's apostle. The prophets carry through. There is no man on earth today that can say, I am God's prophet. Tell the truth. When you say evangelists carry through, there is no man on earth who can say under God, I am an evangelist. He can do the work of an evangelist. That's what I do. And I win souls. I don't drag them in. I don't pull them in. I don't kick them in. I just teach the word and watch them come in. Oh, what a joy that is. What a joy that is. Now, some of them are so anxious to get in, sometimes you almost have to hold them back. They're trying to go too fast when you've really declared the word to them. And so there it is. We've got to test the things that carry through. Now, Paul told Timothy, do the work of evangelists. Timothy, that was for the dispensation of grace. Here you had gifted evangelists. Not men that rented big auditoriums, organized big choirs, and brought people in by buses and trains and everything else to fill the auditorium. And then on the night that they had television, that's when you really get the response, as the people march down the aisles and 15,000 confessed Christ this night. Didn't confess Christ at all. They just wanted to get their mugs on television. They could go back home and watch it a couple of weeks later and say, hey, there I am, there I am. People do anything to get their faces on television. Just anything. And I had a chance to be on television recently, but I thought this mug of mine just isn't going to impress anybody. Yes, the PTL club wanted me to appear. Oh, I got the letter to prove it. Maybe after that found out just who and what I was, I don't think they knew too much about me when they invited me. But I'm not that anxious to have my mug on television, but most people are. Why, you see them stick up a camera out in Los Angeles, and we see them almost every day out there. Around Farmers Market, next door to CBS. I only live a mile from that. They do a lot of things on the street. The other day they stopped right in front of our house, and on some television show, they got a picture of our house there. I never found out just what it was. But boy, you'd be amazed how many people. They just couldn't keep them from trying to get in front of the camera. So they call this evangelism. No, there were gifted evangelists, and that was a man who could really tell the good news. Usually it was a one-on-one or a one-on-two, a one-on-10 or a one-on-20, whatever it might have been. He was a man who could really tell the right message, the gospel message, the power of God unto salvation. Now, it goes just a little further, and he says something to these people that is important. It's in the 2nd chapter, the 5th verse. I'll finish up here in just a moment. He says, "Let this mind be in you which was in Christ Jesus." How would you like to have been an apostle? Commissioned of God, with the signs of an apostle, doing the work of an apostle, and then be stripped down to nothing more than a sinner saved by grace? How would you like it? I don't think I'd like it. So I'd have to have the mind that was in Christ Jesus. See, that's the 5th verse. Who was not just an apostle. He was in the form of God. So much so that he didn't consider it stealing or robbery when he took the place of equality with God. The worship, the honors, the esteem that belonged to God, he took it. And it wasn't stealing. It wasn't stealing. But he emptied himself. That made himself of no reputation is one word in the Greek. It just simply means he emptied himself. Not only that, he took upon himself the form of a slave and was made in the likeness of men. And then being found in fashion of man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death. Not just the death of a martyr or glorious death, but the death of a criminal. A humiliating death that was reserved for the lowest of criminals and slaves, even the death of the cross. Why does he tell these people that? They weren't stepping down so far to give up their little gift because God had brought this all to an end. Let the mind be in you that was in Christ. And I hope that it was there. And they could say, yes, we were apostles. We were apostles. But everything we did has been suspended. All of our powers have been suspended. God will take it up again in the day of Jesus Christ. Now let me show you something. And with this, I'll through. You come to the end of the 2nd chapter, and he says already that he sent Timothy to them. These Philippians needed help. You can't understand all of this has happened. Pronouncement of Acts 28:28 and so on. Paul says, I've sent Timothy to you. And he says, verse 24, I trust in the Lord that I also myself will come shortly. And he says, yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus. What kind of a man was he? But Paul says, he's my brother, that is, in Christ, my brother, and he's my companion in labor, equal, my fellow soldier. He's your messenger. You sent him to me. And he was the one that ministered to my wants. They knew that Paul was in prison. They knew that he was in difficulty, not in too good health. He couldn't have been. As he described himself before. And they said, Epaphroditus, we will send you with money. You go right there. You see that Paul is fed. See that he's clothed. See that he's warm. Provide everything he needs. Stay with him until he's well. Epaphroditus made the long, dangerous journey and took sick. Took sick. Paul says, he longed after you all. And he was full of heaviness. For he'd heard that you had been sick. Oh, that's nothing. Epaphroditus sick. Why, get concerned about Epaphroditus being sick. Even if he's sick unto death. Don't worry about that. The great healer, Paul, is here. The man that just healed everyone on the island of Melita that they brought to him. Who healed the father of Publius of a bloody flux. And according to what Dr. Friends told me, that means typhoid. That signifies typhoid. So when this was done, they brought people on this island that Paul owed nothing to, really, except maybe a little bit for taking care of him after the shipwreck. Mighty nice thing for them to do. But here's Epaphroditus, who's sick nigh unto death. What can Paul do? Nothing more than what I can do. Pray. Pray. Look to God. Tell the Lord about it. Bring it to His attention. Bring it to His attention. You see. So he said, indeed, he was sick nigh unto death. But God had mercy on him, and not on him, but on me only. Because I could have had sorrow on sorrow. I could have had his death on top of my imprisonment and my own illnesses, and couldn't even look after the burial. That's the position he was in. So he said, I sent him therefore more carefully. That is, I kept him as long as I could, then I sent him with great anxiety, so that when you see him again, you may rejoice, and that I may be less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation. If ever a man deserved to be healed, this was the man. Because for the work of Christ, he was nigh unto death. He didn't even regard his own soul, his own comfort. He didn't care whether it took his life or not, as he tried to supply your lack of service toward me. They couldn't be there. Epaphroditus was. So Paul prayed about this. When he got to feeling better, Paul sent him and prayed him all the way back there, I guess. And that's all you and I can do. And that's the way it is in this dispensation of grace. Why didn't Paul just take a handkerchief and put it on his body? He did that in Ephesus. Dispensation has changed. Why didn't two of them get together and say, two of you, why didn't Paul and Epaphroditus claim that promise? If two of you shall agree on earth as touching any one thing that they shall ask, it shall be done for them. It's not quoted quite right, but it's close enough, you remember. Why did they do that? They were men of faith. Just because that had nothing to do with prayer. Nothing to do with getting well. In this, the dispensation of grace, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm sick, if Mrs. Sellers is sick, my daughter is sick, any of my loved ones are sick, any of you are sick, I just hope that you'll have the very best of medical care and the most sincere and honest prayer. It can't go much beyond that. If you hear I'm sick, will you pray that the doctors might have wisdom that they never learned in school? I will for you. If you hear I'm sick, will you pray that all of the nurses might have more dedication and more sincerity maybe than they might have, and maybe neglect something that needed to be done? Pray to that. Would you, if you hear that I'm sick or I hear that you're sick, will you pray that God will give me great patience and understanding of what needs to be done? And above all, that God will act upon those healing processes that He put in the body, which I know will heal a little scratch on my hand, for which I'd never go to the hospital and do nothing more than wipe it off and forget about it. But would you pray that God will act upon those healing processes in the body, and if necessary, even secretly work that miracle that will bring me back to health? And if I should die, will you please remember, it is appointed unto men once to die, and I can't cancel that appointment. Poor old Oral Roberts has just found out that the proper way is the best of medical care along with prayer. So he's building a big hospital now where he used to sock. You ever see him sock people on television?
Yeah.
Boy, did he hit. I bet there were more broken backs from his therapy than there are from automobile accidents. But he's changing now. Just last month he himself had an operation. And I hope they backed it up with prayer too. I may sound like I'm ridiculing, but when a man's sick, it's something. He's sick. And let's just hope that he can get the very best of sincere and conscientious medical care. And that he can also have the prayers of Godspeed. That's just about the best we can do in this, the dispensation, the grace of God. If God works a miracle, it'll be in secret. You'll never know it. You can thank Him for it. You're way behind on your Thanksgiving anyway, and if you should thank Him for something He didn't do, you still won't be caught up. But that's the way we live, and that's the way we walk worthy of the position in which we have been placed. The position in which we have been placed. I continue this tomorrow, and in the 2 studies. So that's all for this study of mine. What are your questions? Take me on first.
Mr. Sellers, this is a question I have on a different book. It's on 2 Peter, his epistle, the 3rd chapter, the 10th verse, and it's been causing me trouble a long time. And now he says over here in verse 10, "For the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burnt up." Now, how could this be the day of the Lord? I thought it was the day of God.
No, that's the day of the Lord. It all takes place in the day of the Lord that brings in the day of God.
Oh, I didn't see it that way.
It takes place. You see, if a man gets married on December 31st, 1979, that happened in 79.
Right.
And this happens at the end of the day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord ends with the complete purging of the earth so that God can bring in the new heavens and new earth. All right, now who is the next one to have their hand up? Yes, brother.
But the way I understand Philippians, where it talks about Epaphroditus, he was healed, wasn't he?
Yes, I believe he was.
Yeah.
But it was just the basis of God having mercy on him. He doesn't say there was a miracle. He doesn't claim any great answers to prayer. He said God had mercy on him and He raised him up. Or I'd have had sorrow on top of sorrow.
But there was another reference in the Bible where a person wasn't healed. I forget where it was. I think you mentioned in one of your talks.
Well, Paul had a thorn in the flesh, and he prayed for its removal, and it was not removed, so that was in the Acts period. But there was a reason for that. There was a reason for that. That's something different. And yet, when Paul went on the Isle of Miletus, Acts 28, the 28th chapter, he healed everybody on that island. Now, the theologians say that miracles were prolific and prominent in the day of Pentecost, then they wane out until there's very few. But just the fact that God didn't want to fill that book with a lot of miracles, that's tedious reading even, one after another. And but when you get to Acts 28, read there what happened on the Isle of Miletus. Boy, there was healing after healing. Healing after healing. Yes.
You elaborate on the point you made that believers in this dispensation might be, you said, I think, will be outcalled in the next dispensation.
I fully believe that the man who puts his faith in Jesus Christ, based upon what God has said concerning him in this Word, in this, the dispensation, the grace of God, in this time of God's silence, in this time when there's nothing to confirm the Word, I believe that that man has been chosen already, elected for the Son place, the royalty, and that his nature will be to extol the glories of God's grace. See? And that he showed in this the dispensation of grace, when the world's sin reached its highest peak.
Show me scripture on that? Indication?
Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4 or 5 verses there. And to serve that way, we will have to mediate. And well, when you're mediating, you have to have a position out of Christ. And when you have a position out of Christ, you are ecclesia, out position. Yes, brother. Yeah.
I don't want to be humble because I don't know the scriptures that well to quote anything, but I
Oh, well, we'll help you.
When the Lord was calling out the disciples, were they generated to know that He was the Son of God? And if so, the meeting with Peter on a mountaintop where He was revealed, that He said only God could have revealed this to you, but to Peter. What significance would that be in reference to the disciples that already knew He was the Son of God prior to that?
We cannot say that any of them knew that He was the Christ, the Son of God. There was no proclamation as to who this was. Here was a great miracle worker among them. Here was one who they thought would be the promised king. And they committed themselves to him in advance of knowing even for sure that he was. But then it came to a place where these men could say, "You are the Christ." That's Matthew 16. "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." He said, "Blessed art thou, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh," that is what you are by culture and birth and education and training and everything else, what you are by flesh didn't reveal this to you, neither what you are by nationality, blood, race, revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. And then, right then, he stopped the message. He said, "Don't tell anyone that I'm the Christ." And these 12 men who knew this, knew it by divine revelation, he stopped the message till the Son of Man was risen from the dead. And if you read, that's in Matthew 13, you'll find it there. Now, no one has ever come into relationship with God unless God started it. And the way that God started it, of course, is by giving man light. And light comes with every breath that you draw. It doesn't increase. It'll never go out. The darkness can't extinguish it. But every time you draw in your breath, even a sinner, that old bum that wants you to give him a few pennies and change, every time he draws in his breath, he draws in light from God. He knows above his being there's a being spring. Now, I know he's not going to do anything about it. Can't say he's not hasn't had light though. And if he'd just grope after God, I think he'd find him, because he's not far from any one of us. Yes, Dad.
So it's back here to Philippians, that first chapter and 6th verse. What do you think the translators of the King James Version were trying to get across when they translated it that way?
I don't think they knew what to do with it. And so they wanted to say something which wouldn't conflict with anything the church was doing or practicing. And that just tells you nothing. To approve the things that are excellent. That's kind of a ridiculous statement.
But it gives the impression that things will continue to go until the day of Christ.
Oh, you mean 36? Yes.
Yeah.
What they did, they translated, because they knew nothing about God bringing anything to an end. They thought that what started at the birth of Christ was a new religion, and that the Lord would just perform this until the day of Christ. Then the revisers saw that that couldn't be true, and they used the word perfect. He'll perfect it until. But you don't perfect a thing until. Anyone knows that cameras are not perfected. But you can't, if they're either going to perfect them or not. They're perfecting them all the time. But you can't perfect them until it just doesn't fit together. You see. You can't say, "I'll perfect this till May the 10th. What about after May the 10th? Will it be imperfect then? Or would you have to go on perfecting it? No, didn't belong there. What got me started on this was an commercial artist. Man made his living, commercial artist. He was a student of the Greek. And a businessman, of course, he owned studios. He asked me why it was that the King James Version said perform there, and that the Revised Version said perfect. He got me started. I wrote back and I said, "You know something I don't know, and you're trying to make me dig it out." I said, "I know the Greek word, it's epiteleo, and I know teleo means to finish." And all at once I saw that this was the greatest passage in the Word of God that had to do with the change that took place at Acts 28:28, unless it were Acts 28:28 itself, that the good work that God began among them, which was the blade and the ear stage of the kingdom, He had brought in the blade stage and the ear stage of the kingdom, and that the full grain in the ear, the manifest kingdom of God, had all been brought to an end, to a full end, until the day of Jesus Christ. And since then, we might say God hasn't done a lick of work on bringing in His government. And all we've got today is man's government, and it has got so bad that even the wicked are crying out and say, "Why doesn't God do something?"
So were the 12 apostles authorized to go to Jews outside the land
No.
in the Acts period?
they were not sent outside the land, as far as we know. Any visitors in the land they could have spoken to, but they covered the land, and that's all we know about them if we trace there. But they didn't go outside the land. Lily.
Going all the way back to the book of Genesis.
Yes.
Genesis 5:1 says that God created me in the likeness of God, which is Adam.
Well,
Now, are we created in the likeness of God, or
no.
so Adam?
We are created, God created man in his image and after his likeness, which will tell you that God had an image. There are no images of me anywhere except a few photographs, and those really are not images. But God created man in his image and after his likeness. Now, God's invisible. So if you would make an image of him, what would you make? Oh, I said make him like an elephant, great big. Give him the legs of a leopard. Make him swift to get everywhere. Give him 1,000 eyes so he can see everything at one time. So that's the way you build an idol, you know, is take composite parts of animals as a rule. No, God said, let us make man in our image. So God had an image. And that image is the Lord Jesus Christ, for he is the image of the invisible God. And we are made in his image and after his likeness. And apparently the image of God had a form that would be comparable to what man has, which we can hardly see today because of the fall and the deterioration ever since the fall. And man deteriorates every day. I don't think that there's a day that the human race does not deteriorate. I wish that that were not true. So whenever we need congressmen and senators and presidents, we've got to take them out of this deteriorated human race. So what do we send up to Congress and Senate? We send up a bunch of men to settle everything over cocktails and nothing being settled. They're pretty well drunk. And that's your government today, and you know it is, because they say so themselves. And every now and then they have to take one, like Senator Talmadge, and put him in the hospital down in Long Beach and get him dried out so he can come back and serve in the Senate. But think how long he was serving in there when he was drunk. What's the other fellow's name? Mills. And so on. But if you can't say we'll go among angels and get senators. You've got to take them from among men. The human race is so deteriorated. They're so covetous. They are such calumniators. They're such slanderers. All the time putting on the facade of religion. Forms of godliness. And we've got to select our congressmen out of this kind of people. You say, well, have some better men. There aren't any better men. That's just the way men are. And the better men wouldn't serve if there are any better men. We're in bad shape. We need God's government. We need divine intervention. Tony Fortinakis.
Okay, now in 1 Kings 17 chapter.
1 Kings 17th chapter.
Verses 21 to 23. Yeah, you got it?
Yeah.
It mentions that Elijah, I came across this verse in it mentions that Elijah prayed that the soul of the child...
Absolutely.
Couldn't someone prove the immortality?
They do.
They do.
That's used. That's just because that they do not start at the beginning. They start with something they want to prove.
How do you disprove it?
I say Ephraim is joined to his idols. Let him alone.
Is that all?
No. But sometimes I get that far. All the way through, the soul is the person himself. And a dead man is certainly not himself, or a dead boy. What he actually wanted was the thing that would make this child a living soul again. So that soul would be in this child. And this child would be soul. See? But what it took to make him so would be that the breath of life would come in, because that's what makes him a living soul. When you get this truth all the way through, then you would know that this is what Elijah desired. For the soul to go out, if the Bible ever speaks of the soul going out, it is because that the breath has gone out, for the breath is spirit. And that's life, you see. And if soul returns, that is because the breath is returned, and the breath is spirit. And man becomes a living soul once again. And people will use this. And of course, when you get these translations by men who were just simply Platonists all the way through, and not one of them was a biblicist as far as man's nature was concerned. So I take the whole thing of the Bible. You know, I've said that people will start with 1 Thessalonians 4 to get their truth about the nature of man. Where if they start with Luke 10, to say something entirely different. But they start with the passage that proves what they already believe. And I refuse to do that.
But the Hebrew word soul, is that...
that is the word nephesh. That is the word nephesh. And ask them to tell you what the soul is. Where was it when it was out? According to their theories, it either had to be in heaven or hell. Oh, they say, but the Jews had a theory that the soul hung around for 3 days. They bring in Jewish theories then. And I'm sure that anybody that's a Jew will tell you how many theories the Jews had, because they're great people to make up theories. Like one Jewish girl said to me, she said, I asked her about something, she said, well, I don't know a thing, I start a rumor. So he was honest. That's why we do.
In order to complete the argument, I guess I have to tell him that somebody came across with that. I simply tell him what? That nephesh means living soul?
Nephesh means a living soul, of course.
Yes. And what if he says, well, his soul was in heaven, and how would I...
Well, ask him what he told when he got back as to what heaven is like, and what they're doing there, and so on. You know, and nobody knows anything about heaven. Nobody's ever been there. I can tell you a lot about Hawaii. I can tell you a lot about California. I can tell you a lot about Florida. Been there. But I don't know anything about heaven. And nobody else does. You say, but the Lord Jesus was there, and he came back, never said a word about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, that reference that Leon mentioned in Peter about the thief, about the heavens passing away. We said that's the day of the Lord. Is that in the beginning of the day or the end of the day? I mean,
it's the end of the day of the Lord.
In other words, before the
the day of God comes.
After the 1,000 years.
After the 1,000 years, before the day of God comes in. Esther.
If you cite in passing Genesis 1:26, let us create man in our image, or something to that effect. I'd like to hear your explanation of the plural reference.
Well, you have a plural majesty. You have a plural of what you might call dignity in the Hebrew. Yet when you come to the verb, in the beginning God created, the verb singular, and anyone knows the Hebrew language knows that you would not use a singular verb with a plural noun unless that noun can be used in some special way. You see, in our language, well, you're familiar with the fact that Greek and Spanish and so on, that and Dutch, you have to have a masculine article with a masculine noun, and a feminine article with a feminine noun, and a neuter article with a neuter noun, and so on. It's just the way that it is, although there's variations in this. And when it says in the beginning God created is singular. But God apparently is plural. But it was one that did it. So this is I put a note in my Bible on that just the other day because I was thinking about it, and the plural of majesty, Elohim, indicating greatness, infinity, incomprehensibleness of the deity. It's what you call the plural of intensity. They use the plural to this. Now, why do we always say sheep? Whether it's one sheep, or two sheep, or 1,000 sheep. Because we got no singular for it. And that's both singular and plural. Now, we can't take even things in English. When Joseph Smith tried to translate the Old Testament and give what he called his inspired version, he started out with, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. But in the beginning God's created it. But he was a polytheist and gave him a chance. But he took it out, though. He later took it out. He had so many mistakes in that. You know, in the Mormon Bible, the so-called Mormon Bible, it says that Christ would be born in Jerusalem. And you know they have made thousands of corrections, but they've never corrected that. Whether it would just be too obvious or not, I don't know. Go ahead, Ted.
Okay, back to the soul, dead soul, living soul. Well, I listened to a tape by a man who tried to prove that the breath of life, the neshama, he tried to prove that that breath was the soul life. Something like this. And
it's just the breath of life. That's all it is. The breath which is life. And when God breathed in the man's nostrils the breath of life, man became a living soul. That's what man became. And that is exactly the same statement as I married and became a husband. And I had a daughter and I became a father. See? And I have brothers and sisters, so I am a brother. To my sisters, my other brothers. And I'm was a child of my mother and father, but I became all of these. Now, God made Adam. He made man. Not a body, not a house to put the man in, for him to move into. He made man of the dust of the earth. See? And then breathed into his, that's the man's nostrils, the breath of life. You see, the breath that brings life, the breath that is life, with the result that man became a living soul, and I am a soul. I have emotions. See, I can rejoice, I can